if you were following along on my weekly vlogs, I did participate in the romance. Words. Hi everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with August's wrap up. So hello, it is time to talk about the books that I read in the month of August. So I have some super random books on here. If you guys were following along in my weekly vlogs, you knew that I was participating in the autumn equinox semester of the Magical Readathon. And I kind of sort of was successful. I'll leave all those vlogs linked down below, or at least I'll leave like my vlog playlist linked down below where you can find everything. But basically I had 8 books that were required and I read 7 of the 8, but as of recording this I have finished the last one. So if you were watching the vlogs, now you know. I did finish the very last one in like the first couple of days of the month. So I was successful in that front. It wasn't like I didn't finish it in time for the beginning of September, but I did finish it and it does count. So without further ado, let's just dive into the books that I read in August. So I read 12 books in the month of August, and that was over about 3,510 pages, which was roughly somewhere in the vein of about 70 hours listened. And that was over 1 audiobook, 5 physical books, and 6 mixed books, which is unheard of, honestly. The fact that there was only 1 on just audio, now granted all the mixed books were audio and some other format, but still, like, the amount of physical books I read, granted they were all graphic novels or mangas or something like that, but still, that's a lot. And as far as the age categories go for those books, we had 2 middle grade, 3 YA books, and 7 adult books. And genres were actually relatively narrow this month. We had 3 romance books, 4 fantasy books, 2 mystery books, and 3 sci-fi. And as far as the star ratings go, pretty normal for me. We had 4 5 stars, 7 4 stars, and 1 3 star. So the very first book was actually a continuation from the month previously, and that was my Tessa Dare buddy read. We all kind of like finished it in the very beginning of August, and that was A Lady of Persuasion. This was the 3rd, and I can't remember what this series is called, the Wanton Dairy Maid series trilogy, I think. This was the very, very first book series that Tessa Dare wrote. This was her debut series, and this was the continuation and the finalizing of that series. So this book we follow Isabel, who is the sister of the guy that was the main character in the last book, and she has come because she basically is trying to find a husband, one that can help her out, one that she can maybe get in Parliament. She's really into like the sugar trade and trying to like just make lives better. Like, she doesn't want any kind of slavery, anything like that. She's really into like making the world better, and so she's trying to find a husband who can help her do that. Our main male character in this book is Toby, who we did meet in the very, very first book, and he's mad at her brother, and so he's kind of vowed to make her fall in love with him, although he doesn't register that when he meets her that's who she is, but like that's his goal, is to make the brother angry. So he starts courting her, and it's just a shenanigans galore. I went in with very, very low expectations. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, which is kind of shocking. It's a very low 4 star, but I did give it 4 stars. And that's because we've met Toby before. Like I said, he was in the very first book, and I despise him. He is honestly awful. And I didn't expect anything good. I honestly didn't expect a whole lot of redeeming qualities from him because there wasn't really many to begin with. And so when we were starting this book, I was very like, this guy's gonna be a jerk. But he turned out to be okay. There's still a lot about this book that I didn't like. I mean, he's kind of a jerk still at times, but he's much better than he used to be. Isabel is so focused on being good that like, it almost feels very heavy-handed at times. Like, to the point of like, they can't have conversations without, or go someplace without there being some good cause that's causing them to go somewhere. And so she's not enjoying life. And there's just, while it's good, while she's a very good person and she's standing up for the right types of people, she is just doing it very heavy-handedly. And I'm not sure I believe it, you know? So there's a lot of miscommunication between the 2 of them. They do not talk about the problems, which is one of my biggest issues when it comes to like just romance. Like I wouldn't consider that a miscommunication trope, although there is that in here. But just the whole like not talking, like not necessarily misguiding people and like they're not understanding each other, they're just not talking, and that drives me crazy. So yeah, it was generally okay. I was honestly quite surprised. Still not my favorite series by Tessa Dare by any stretch of the imagination. In this series alone, the second book is my favorite out of these three, but I am glad that I read it. I am glad that Toby did get some redeeming qualities by the end of the story. It was kind of fun. My favorite part of this, which is super ironic, is a side story that we get between a couple of characters. One of them is Josh, the other one is Hedda. We've met them over the course of the last couple of books, and they have a side plot that I adore. Like, I wanted them to be the main couple in this book, and then like Isabel could be like the side plot. Like, that could be cool. But I wanted them, and the fact that they got a side plot instead of a separate book, I'm a little bitter about, because I want their story. And they were my favorite part. Like, straight up my favorite part was this side plot. So they were kind of done dirty just a little bit, in the sense of like they didn't get their full story, but I love them and they make me very happy, and they made this book. So I did enjoy my time reading it. Clearly, I still gave it 4 stars, but it's still not my favorite Tessa Dare book, not my favorite one in the series, and this series overall was just kind of okay. The next book is where we really start the readathon, if you will. I mean, Lady of Persuasion did kind of fit in for a prompt. I made it fit, but this is where we really start the readathon. So the first book was The Emma Project, and this is by Sonalia Dev. This is one that's the final book in the Rajay series, which I have devoured in like the past few months or so. I finished the first 3 books in this series in one weekend. And this series basically follows this family called the Rajay family, and they are relatively wealthy Indian Americans. And they kind of, each book follows a different sibling or a different cousin or something. And so this one follows the youngest of the Rajays, and his name is Vansh. And our main female character in this one is called Naina, and she recently broke up with Vansh's older brother. So like it's the repercussions of that, and then also like their relationship. But every book in this series is very, very loosely based on a Jane Austen book. This one is Emma, and I devoured it. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I will say trigger warnings for this book for domestic abuse, and well, that's kind of a trigger, but like sexism is also a big topic, and just awfulness. So maybe not trigger warnings for that, but like that's in this book, and that's a conversation that they have. But the idea behind this book is that Naina has been given this grant, and then all of a sudden Vansh comes back, and he's basically an adventurer. He's gone back and forth from different countries, helping out different projects that his friends have done, like all good things, like all very good things, but he just kind of floats from project to project. And so he comes back, and this guy who's given her the money is like, ooh, but him. And so he basically makes Naina split the money with him. And so it's the two of them dealing with this situation as their separate projects, because each project is very important. Hers has to do with third world countries and getting women the healthcare they need, and his has to do with homelessness. And so they're both very important things, but it's the whole like they're kind of fighting for the same money situation. And so of course the guy who's in charge of the money is very sexist towards Naina, and there's just a lot there. And I love this series so much because, first off, yes, you've got hints to the Jane Austen books that I love, but you've also got completely well-rounded worlds and characters that if you haven't read Jane Austen's books, you're not missing anything. It's just kind of like some of the themes are the same, and some of the general plot things are the same, and some character names might be the same, but beyond that, it's literally like you don't miss anything. And so that's what I love about these is, you know, you're giving those stories a kind of a revamp, you're giving them a different culture, which is so fun, and just like real world problems, you know, because every single book in the series deals with something, and each one is so different, and some of them you can't really pinpoint. This one definitely has to do with like family, and like our main character Naina, her father is like kind of awful, and he has like the repercussions of living with him, and then also like some of the repercussions of being a woman in like the industry that she's in and healthcare, trying to help out. Like it's just like a bunch of stuff like that you know, like they really talk about, and especially these two characters being from such different worlds, you kind of see where they both come from and kind of like learning from each other. And it's just, I just loved it so much. So 5 stars. I love these books. If you want a romance with a lot of substance and a lot of conversations of different like cultural issues, this series is fantastic. But it also still has those hints to Jane Austen that I just really adore. All right, the next one that I picked up was Lore Olympus, the 2nd volume by Rachel Smith. This is a graphic novel series that I'm sure many people have talked about because this one just came out like this couple of months ago, I want to say. This is a comic that was originally put online on this app called Webtoons. I'm sure many people have heard of it. I love that app. I think it's really great. That's where I actually first discovered this. And now the author's putting them out in print. And so I have been reading them in the print versions because I started reading them online and then I lost where I was. It's been so long that I've basically forgotten a lot of stuff. And so I'm kind of reading them as they come out in paperback. And I adore them. I think the art style is just absolutely stunning. So I gave this one 5 stars. So trigger warnings in this one, because there are some, for physical and mental abuse, mostly themes of that, not necessarily on the page. And then we also have toxic relationships talked about. So this series is basically a reimagining, revamp of the Hades and Persephone mythology. It is set in kind of a more contemporary version. They are still gods and they control stuff, and like Hades is in charge of the underworld, but the underworld looks like this giant city that's all like always at night. And so it's things like that where it's modernized but it's still like the gods. And so Persephone basically comes to Olympus. She's going to school and she has an internship, and Hera basically like sends her to the underworld to work with Hades because she sees how Hades looks at Persephone and is like, kind of play matchmaker there a little bit. And so this is just the continuation from the 1st volume. I adore this series. I love all things Greek mythology. You guys know that by now. I am obsessed with Greek mythology, specifically this kind of myth, the Hades and Persephone myth, but all Greek mythology, all mythology really works for me. And I love the revamp of this. I love the art in this. I think it's, again, so beautiful with all of these fun colors. And I also like the realness of this, of making this myth that is very, very often romanticized. Still romanticized in a sense, but a much more realistic sense. And like, she doesn't shy away from the very tough subjects that are the Greek gods and things of that nature. So I gave it 5 stars. I feel like there's not a whole lot to talk about because it is the 2nd volume and we're starting to get into some of the more spoilery territory, but I adore this series. You can go and like read all the way up to where it is now. I think there's like 100 episodes at this point. This is only up to like 25, I think, at this. I think that's right. I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like 25 is right. So if you want to go and like get a free version of this, download the app and you can like read the entire thing. But I adore this series so much, and so I couldn't wait to read the next one, and I am now not so patiently waiting for the 3rd volume to come out. Yes, I could read it online, but I want to read it in like print. I don't know. There's just something about it that makes me happy. So yeah, that was good. The next 2 books I am going to do together because they are 3 and 4 of the Magic Misfits series by Neil Patrick Harris. I gave both of these 4.5 stars. So this is a series that I have now officially finished, and I adored it so much. So the idea behind this is we follow these 6 kids, which you can see right here on the front, and they create this little group called the Magic Misfits. They are all interested in magic, kind of the like sleight of hand magician magic. So you've got a kid who's really into cards and card tricks. You've got a guy who's interested in like levitation and that kind of magic. You've got a girl who's into straitjackets. You've got a girl who's into like inventing and stuff like that. And then you've got this brother and sister duo who are into the more comedic sides and like doing tricks and things like that, like more acrobatic, if you will. And so they kind of create this group in the very, very first book, and things happen, and it just kind of stems from that. It stems from, there's some secrets from one of the parents of these 6 and his past and his little group that he created, because he also had kind of like a Magic Misfits group, and the secrets that stem from that. So I seriously adore this series. Out of these 2, I liked the last one a little bit more just because we get a lot of closure. I mean, you would with the final book, but there's a lot more action-packed. I've noticed with the 2nd and the 3rd book, it took me about halfway through the book to really get into it, and the 3rd one had a big cliffhanger, so I had to immediately pick up the 4th one. There's not a whole lot I want to say about these 2 books because, again, these are the last 2 books in the series, but just the kids and their friendship makes me so happy. This is perfect for your like middle grade kind of young, maybe younger middle grade. It does kind of lean towards that as far as the writing, but I love Neil Patrick Harris's writing style. I think it's so fun. I think it's so funny. I highly recommend the audiobooks as well, because each of these books is told by a different kid. So it's in the perspective of a different kid. It is third person, but it's what, I can never remember what that is, but you know, like third person where like you're in their head. And so of course each book has a different narrator, but in between the books, or in between the chapters, there are sections that teach you how to do specific tricks. They're called these how-to sections. They show you how to do whatever trick they're about to do in the book, or they've just talked about in the book. So while you're reading, you could also learn like sleight of hand magic and stuff like that, if that is something that you are interested, or if you're thinking about this for your kid is interested. But again, super humorous, super fun. It does get darker as the series continues as far as like the topics they talk about, but nothing that's too much for middle grade. I just love it. You know, like I'm obsessed with this series. The first one was super cozy. It's got illustrations throughout it, and there's just so fun. And there's little things in the back of the book after you read each book that kind of like hidden messages and how you can, you know, decipher certain messages throughout these books. So there's extra pieces to the books beyond just reading them. And I think it's so fun. I think kids will love it, and I loved it. And I'm so happy that, like, I'm sad to see these characters go, but I'm very happy with how this ended. It felt very like a good closure, you know? So, yeah, I'm so happy I was able to finish the series. So I read those two. Next book was one of my most anticipated releases of the year, even though it came out in like, I feel like it came out at the beginning of the year, but maybe I made that up. But that was The Monarchs, and that is by Cass Morgan and Danielle Page. This is the sequel to The Ravens, which I read last year about this time. This is just a duology, so this is the end, unless they decide to come out with more in the future, but this felt like an end to me, and I gave it 5 stars. So this world basically follows a college campus, and there's a sorority on this campus that are called the Ravens. That's not their, like, Greek lettered name, but I can't remember what that is, but like they're referred to as the Ravens, and they are very, very picky about the people who go into their group, and everyone else on campus just thinks that they're crazy picky, and like it's really hard to get into it. And so there's this like mysterious element to this sorority, whereas if you're in the sorority, you know you're in there because you are a witch, and the sorority is actually a coven, and so you're learning about your powers. And then there's also some other crazy stuff that goes on in the first book. So this book follows on with the repercussions of what happened in the first book, and just some other, you know, magical stuff. There's a rival sorority that's starting to become more popular and more powerful, so there's just some kind of like questions and weird stuff that is going on campus, and they just need some answers. Love, 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 love this book. I still am not sure why it gravitates towards me, and like I just love this book because it doesn't feel like there's anything spectacular about the writing or anything like that. I think it's just the idea of this very witchy atmosphere on a college campus, so it gives you the spookiness that you want for this time of year. It's perfect for like the beginning of fall, because like that's right when school starts, and like, well, this book specifically takes place in the second half of the semester, so like it starts right after Christmas break. It still has that like cozy, spooky atmosphere that I personally am always looking for at this time of year and love. I love all the witchiness. I love all the spells and incantations and learning about magic, and also the fact that it's set on college campus. That makes me very happy. I will say, for this book specifically, and it might be in the first book, but I can't remember, but in this book specifically, I will say trigger warnings for like minimal self-harm. And I say minimal because like it's not, it's for spells and things like that. So I know that's a huge trigger for a lot of people, but it's not necessarily like because of a mental thing. It has to do with the magic system a little bit. So just be wary of that if that is something that you know, it's not your favorite thing in the world. But I love this series. I love that there's only 2, so you really don't have to dedicate too much. There is an end to the first book, so if you read the first book and you're happy and you feel like you don't need any more, then there's definitely an end to that. But I love this because it definitely adds on, and I thought it was great. I thought it was so great, and I just love all these characters, and I fell in love with them. And they're so southern because I believe this campus is somewhere set in like Georgia. It talks about Savannah a lot, so I think Savannah is pretty close. So I'm thinking it's like, you know, North Georgia, somewhere in there. And I love it. I just love it. I love the series so much. So yes, 5 stars. Did not disappoint. I had super high expectations, and it still blew it out of the water, and I don't even know how I did that. The next book I picked up was the second volume of Descender. This one is called Machine Moon. It's a very interesting cover we've got here. So this one I picked up because I read the first volume last month for that vlog I did where I read books because of G. It was my BookTube Made Me series. And I loved it. It was so good. So I picked up the rest of the series and I've just been making my way through it. Actually, I'm going to skip a book and we're going to do two together because I read the third one as well. So I gave the second volume, I gave it 4.5 stars, and I gave the third volume 4. So this series is kind of a sci-fi futuristic world where there are robots. And the first volume really kicks off because there are these, I can't remember what they're called, but they're these really big robots that just kind of like show up and start shooting up places. And they start attacking everything and then disappear. And everyone's kind of on the fence of like, are they going to come back? Are we safe? What's going on? They like did a bunch of like destruction. Now what? And so you've got factions who are so against robots that all they're trying to do is collect robots and kill them because they're worried that these big harvesters, that's what they're called, the big harvesters are going to come back. You've got people who want to get to the robots because they could teach them more about maybe if they're going to come back. And then there's just kind of like people in between. And so the series really kicks off with this little bot right here. He's called a companion bot. His name is Tim21. And basically it's exactly what it sounds like, is like a bot who is hired to be a companion for somebody. And so he is a companion for a young boy on this mining colony. And so it's many years after the harvesters have come and left, and he is all alone on this planet, and he just kind of wakes up and discovers what's going on, and people are after him because his code is very, very similar to the code of the harvesters. And so some people are like, oh, he's the key to figuring out everything with these guys, and some of them are like, he's just another robot, let's kill him. And so he kind of gets with a bunch of people and they're like trying to figure out what's going on. And so we just have a continuation from that. So the next volume was very, very similar. It was very action-packed. There was a little bit of a cliffhanger on the first one, so I was very excited to get to the second one. And there is a humongous cliffhanger on the second one. So it's really just kind of like adding more pieces. The way that I think about it is the first 2 volumes are just kind of like, here's the world, we're setting up the entire thing, so we're just going to add a bunch of information and kind of give you all of that information. So we're introduced to different characters, we see different worlds and things like that. And then when we get to the third volume, which has an even creepier cover, the third volume is basically like, okay, now that we've given you all of the characters you're going to need, let me tell you about why they're where they are. And so you see the, like, each volume, or not volume, each like chapter in this volume, I think there's about 5, follows a character that we've already met and follows their history and like how they became who they are, how they got to where we meet them, why they're doing what they're doing, and things like that. So there's characters that we were like randomly introduced in the second one, which are going to be super important, and like I could tell they're going to be super important, but it was very confusing because like it was just a lot of information, and this explains it all. And so I really liked that because like you've had 2 super, super go stories, and then you've got one that kind of explains and catches you up to the present. So like the cliffhanger in this one is not really addressed at all. So I need the 4th one because I have questions. So I loved this series. Again, I gave both of these, what, 4.5 stars, 4 stars. So I'm loving it, and I'm already halfway through, which is very exciting because there's only 6 volumes in this one, and then there is a kind of like continuation that's 4 volumes. Overall, I have loved this series, and I'm excited to see where it goes because we have some answers that I need answers to a couple of things that have happened. So yeah, very glad I got the next 2 down. I'm so excited to continue. So in between those 2 volumes, I read What Once Was Mine, and this is by Liz Braswell. It's one of the Disney Twisted Tales books. We have 4. My husband's read 1. We have the Aladdin one, the Beauty and the Beast one, the Tangled one, and then the Hercules one. And I didn't really know what I was getting into. I don't want to say I went in with low expectations because that's not really true. I just didn't know what I was getting into. I'd never read one of these books before. My best friend Lauren has read them and really, really loves them. And so like I was expecting to enjoy them. I did not expect to enjoy it nearly as much as I did because I gave this 5 stars and I legit couldn't put it down. Like I started this book and I was like, what is happening? I need answers. And so I just kept going and reading. So this entire series, I'm sure many of you know the kind of the idea and the premise behind it, but the series basically takes a Disney story that you know really well and twists one thing by asking a question. And so that kind of like changes the idea of the story. In this book, the one change is when Rapunzel's mom is pregnant with her and she's getting really, really sick. In the movie, we see her take the sunflower, and like that's the potion she takes. In this book, we have a moonflower instead. And so her powers are very precarious, and so she's kind of shipped off to live with this other woman who turns out to be Mother Gothel. And what happens with that? She lives in this tower and she's trying to, you know, just survive. And so what I liked about this is this book starts with a brother and sister, and the sister is obsessed with Tangled. She is in the hospital. She is going through chemotherapy. And so they have just finished watching the movie, and she hands him the book version, basically like the book adaptation of the movie, and basically says, okay, now please read to me. And he's like, we literally just watched the movie. Why am I reading it to you? And he goes, she's like, because I love Tangled. Please read. And so he decides to kind of switch it up. So he basically like confirms with her that like all of the things are going to be the same. Mother Gothel's going to be bad. Rapunzel and Flynn are going to kind of like still run into each other and things like that. She's still going to have powers, but he switches up the moon and sun power and like makes it more interesting for him to tell. And so it's a very fascinating story because, again, you see the remnants of the original throughout it, and like how we end up where we end up and like why people are acting a certain way, but only like by changing one thing does that change. Like it's just kind of like the ripple effect of that. And I loved it, and I don't know exactly why, you know, like it was really fun, just really liked it. I really want to keep reading this. Like I really want to read the Hercules one next because that sounds really interesting to me, and I've kind of become obsessed with the series now, which is a problem because there's like 20,000 of them and we don't need 20,000, but now I want them. So yeah, this just started off a whole domino effect that you may be seeing many more of these, but I really adored it. I thought it was so good, and I don't know why I thought it wasn't going to be as good as I did end up liking it, but it was just so good. It was so good. I then read Wicked Beauty by Katie Robert, which is her most recent book in the Dark Olympus series. I know there's only been 4 announced, but she's also kind of like announced on her own that there's going to be like at least 10 or 11 books in the series, and I could not be happier. So this one is her newest one. It came out earlier this year, and it follows the Greek myth. Well, it doesn't really follow a specific Greek myth, but it follows Achilles, Patroclus, and Helen. So we do have a lot of hints to the Iliad and like, no, just the Iliad. I was going to say the Odyssey too, but it's mainly the Iliad. So this world is kind of a reimagination. I know I've talked about it a bunch, but it's basically a city and a modernized reimagination of Olympus. So you have the city of Olympus, and it's controlled by what's called the 13. And those are like the big gods. They're kind of like titles. And I'll read you a couple. We've got Aphrodite, Hermes, Festus, Dionysus, Demeter, and then you've got your normal Hera, Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, things like that. And so in this world, those titles can be passed down via different ways based on the title. So like, for example, the title of Zeus is passed down from father to son. The title of Hera is just whoever marries Zeus. And then you've also got places like Aphrodite and Demeter who pass them down based on like who they say. So like if they want their daughter or son to become the next Aphrodite, Demeter, etc., then that's who they can say. But they can also just say somebody totally different and say, I want that person to be the new this when I'm gone. This book, however, follows the spot of Ares, and the most recent Ares has died, and so in order to get a new Ares, they have to do a competition of sorts, and Achilles really wants to be Ares. So he joins this competition, and his best friend Patroclus / best friend / lover Patroclus also joins for him, and like, the idea is that the two of them are going to kind of compete together as a team until they get to the end, and then Patroclus is going to step down and Achilles will be the one. So it's kind of like he's only joining this competition to kind of help Achilles. And then we've also got Helen, who really also wants to be Ares, and her brother is the most recent Zeus, and he very much does not want her to be a part of this. So he decides what he's going to do is that whoever wins the spot of Ares is going to marry Helen. He just like gives her as a prize, and she's like, absolutely not. And so she enters the competition as well. And so it's the 3 of them, and they form an alliance and bond of sorts. And so this story I ended up giving 4 stars to. It is still very good. I still enjoyed a lot of this book. I loved some of the chemistry between our main 3 characters because this is a story of a throuple. I've discovered that those usually don't work for me. I love Katie Roberts. I will continue to read a bunch of Katie Roberts books, and I will continue to read her Dark Olympus series. I will continue to read her Wicked Villain series, things like that. I'm hoping to get to her backlogged books as well. But when it comes to throuples, there's something with the chemistry of it being 3 people that doesn't click with me, and I never feel as connected to the characters as I would normally. And I don't know why that is. It might just be that, like, that's not the partnership that I want from life, so like it doesn't connect with me as far as like what I relate to, or it just could be there's an extra third person and I'm not quite sure how like all of that works. So I don't know, it could just be something as simple as that, but triples don't work as well for me. I've discovered that because every triple I've read from this author has always paled in comparison to other books. I've enjoyed them. I've still given a lot of them 4 and 4.5 stars, but they always never make it to 5 stars. So I think that's why I was disconnected from this book. It was fine. I didn't dislike it by any stretch of the imagination, but it wasn't as good as the others in this series. So I'm interested to see where the series continues, because I know that we are going to continue with more stories. Like I said, the next one is going to be Cassandra and Apollo. I'm very interested in that one. But it was good. Like, I don't know, it was kind of a letdown because I wanted this series to be so amazing and I was so hooked immediately by the first 2 books in the series, and this one just kind of like fell a little flat compared to those. But still gave it 4 stars, still really enjoyed it. So glad that I did read it, and I will continue with this series, of course, and more things by this author. Like, I'm not saying I'm never gonna keep reading, because I'm gonna keep reading, but every time a triple comes up, I think I'm gonna have to like just go in knowing it's gonna be not as entertaining for me as maybe some of the other books, which is totally fine. That's just something that doesn't work for me, but I still enjoy them. Like, it's weird. It's this weird thing of like, I know I'm going to enjoy it, but I'm not going to enjoy it as much as the other things. But yeah, I'm glad I read it though, so that's exciting. And then the very last book that I read, I just snuck in literally the last day, was the first volume of How to Treat Magical Beasts, Mine and Master's Medical Journal, and this is by Kazuya. I gave this one 3 stars. I enjoyed my time reading this one. It just kind of felt a little flat. We follow our main character right here, and she is an apprentice to a vet in this kind of like historical town. And he treats mainly like, you know, normal animals. She has magical powers, which he does know about. And so she ends up helping him treat stuff, but also like creating tonics and herbs that are more magical in nature that helps animals out. And also like magical beasts. He starts treating a bunch of magical beasts because of her. So the overarching story of this book is like, she doesn't believe in her powers nearly as much as she should. And he's trying to help her like gain confidence in that. But it's literally like just like exactly what it sounds like. It's each chapter is a different magical beast, and they're going to work on that beast, and they're going to figure out what's wrong with it, and they're going to fix it in the next one, and move on and on and on. So there's only 4 volumes in this, but I think I'm going to stop here. I found the other 2 at a used bookstore recently, but I decided not to pick them up because, like, even though there was kind of a cliffhanger at the end of this book, it's just so repetitive of like each story, you know, you're going to get a new beast, you know, you're going to figure out what's wrong with it. She's going to question her powers, but she's going to get over it and everything's going to be fine. We're going to move on. And that's what every single chapter in this book was about. And the fact that I think that's just going to be the way going forward, which is fine. It's just kind of boring in my opinion, as far as like the repetitiveness of it. If I don't like it. It works for some people, but I feel like it just didn't work for me. I gave it 3 stars because I did enjoy it. I liked seeing the different conversations about magical beasts, and there is some surgery in this book, but because it's like drawn, it's not gross, and there's like, it's not colored or anything like that. So like I could get through that. But there is some surgery that you see on the page, so be wary of that if that's like animal things or like trigger for you. But it just kind of, I don't know, like it just kind of felt okay. Like there was nothing, we weren't impactful in any way, in the sense of it's like just the same thing over and over again. Like we fix that animal's life and then we move on and that's it. And so, I don't know, it's just kind of like boring. So I gave it 3 stars because I did enjoy it, but it's not my favorite. And I think I'm going to say no to that, and we're probably going to unhaul that book and we're not going to finish it, which is fine. That's fine. But that's it. That is a look at all of the books that I read in August. I hope that you enjoyed. Please let me know down below if you've read any of the books that I mentioned in today's video, or if there's something that you really, really enjoyed or didn't enjoy in the month of August. Let me know down below. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so don't forget to check all of that out, and I will see you guys in my next video.